spirit of this revolution is not going away.
This is the Ron Paul Liberty Report with Ron Paul, Daniel McAdams, and Chris Rossini.
We are all ambassadors of the Ron Paul doctrine, and it's so simple. Just tell the truth.
An idea whose time has come cannot be stopped by any army or any government.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning into the Liberty Report. With us today, we have Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, good to see you.
Good morning, Dr. Paul. How are you today?
Doing good.
All right. All right.
All we have to do is solve a few problems.
Just a couple.
Seek the truth, make everybody happy, or scared, or poor. But seems like the Supreme Court had to be busy. What if they stayed up late at night doing some of this stuff? But a lot of activity there, but there have been quite a few things come out. I guess one of the big ones on these orders coming out is the Supreme Court strikes down Trump's Birthright Citizenship executive order. And I'm sure there's something in there that we say, well, that's not too bad. Maybe we should be, more open-minded about this. But there's a lot of questions there. I predict, and my predictions, aren't all that great, but I predict this won't settle it, that there will still be some argument and unhappiness and examples one way or the other. And it's pretty amazing how many confused things can happen and theoretically happen with this. Yeah, it's pretty important, to know who are the citizens. And I think the more the merrier. The more tolerant we are, the better. So this is an effort where there's a lot of good motivations. But the one thing I keep thinking about, because the court did rule that the states and the people who wrote these laws that only men and women, could participate in sports, and it has to be divided, sorted out by biological science. And can you imagine? I was imagining the founders getting together. Okay. How are we going to define women and men? How are we going to let them mix it up and compete in sports against each other? Well, somebody would say, well, maybe the women will have their own sports. If it's a free country, they might do something like that. But can you imagine what they would think looking at this, the effort that has been put into this, deciding, the definition of what a woman and a man is, and reject science. They pretend they're really sorting it out and they're doing this for equal justice. Well, it's that one is, I think, equal chaos. But there's a lot of effort poured in here on the citizenship executive order and the birthright. And, citizenship is very important. If you're an American citizen, you have certain rights, and they should be, as uniform as possible. But there are still a lot of crazy things that might still pop up on how people get into this country and what their character's all about. I mean, it's almost like, well, I just murdered somebody, I'm going to America. I can start a new life there. And, you're going to be an illegal immigrant. Oh, no, they'll let me vote. I don't even have to identify myself. I'll go vote. I guess that's a little bit too cynical, but that's sometimes that's the way I feel.
Yeah, and it's a very contentious issue. And it's one, unfortunately, for me, I have PTSD because when I was on your staff, I had to do immigration. I drew the short straw and talk about a topic that you have no friends. I mean, people would call on either side and they would yell at me all day. So I'm still a little bit emotionally wounded by that. But nevertheless, it is a serious issue. The question is whether if someone happens to be born on U.S. soil, that person is conferred with all the privileges of being a U.S. citizen. Now, Trump, go ahead and put that first one up. Trump tried to solve the problem with an executive order, repealing the idea of birthright citizenship by simply being on the soil. And this is what we're talking about that was just struck down by the Supreme Court. Now go to the second clip, and this is what the Supremes said in a massive 194-page ruling, the court affirmed a district ruling holding that Executive Order 14160, Trump's attempt to deny automatic citizenship to children born in the to U.S. parents, in the U.S. to parents who are undocumented or only temporarily present, violates the 14th Amendment Citizenship Clause. Chief Justice Roberts wrote the majority opinion, joined by Sotomayor, Kagan, Barrett, and Jackson. Now, here's the interesting part that's worth thinking about. I apologize for that. Justice Kavanaugh provided the sixth vote against the order, while explicitly rejecting the majority's constitutional theory, arguing the executive order fails only because it conflicts with a 1940s immigration statute, leaving the door open for Congress, not the Constitution, to revisit the question. And I think that's probably the most interesting part of what happened. I think Kavanaugh, in my opinion, based on our long friendship with people like Jonathan Turley, I think Kavanaugh is onto something there.
You know, this really emphasizes the understanding and the perceptions we have of the Congress not meeting their responsibilities, because we talk about that all the time. You know, one of the big issues today, even though they're not talking about as much today as yesterday, and that is going to war, starting war. Congress is totally derelict, and it's been that way for a long time, and it keeps getting worse. So the Congress could do a lot more, but they want to defer to the president, and that's a part of the problem. But it's the suggestion that we go to the Congress for that. It's not an answer, because the Congress doesn't do it. The Congress must be more susceptible to the lobby industry, you know, because you have so many people looking for money, and they get converted. It's like a disease. They go to Washington with high ideals.
Yeah. Then
all of a sudden, the money is an issue. They need their pay raises, and that's not a huge deal. But then they go and they say, "But I want to do good," and I could have said, which I did not say, that when I went to Congress, it might have been a fluke. I didn't realize that you could get elected under the circumstances of the program I was, promoting. But I would think that it would be something that we could understand better. But the system is designed to provide the money and the support, because once they're there, for the members are there, they're also saying, I got to be promoted, I have to do good, and I have to have seniority, and there's egos to take care of, and then there's fights among the Congress. So it's I talk about moral bankruptcy and financial bankruptcy, but there's a bankruptcy of sort of ethical, normal conduct within politicians when you have big government. If you had less government, I think we would have a lot less of this nonsense.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the 14th Amendment came about, as many people, hopefully most people understand from high school civics. Do they teach that anymore? I don't know. Homeschoolers would. But after the Civil War, where you had freed black slaves because of Dred Scott versus Sanford, denied citizenship. So they obviously were here, they had been here, they had children here, they were denied citizenship. So in 1868, they passed the 14th Amendment, which, among other things, declared that all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. Now, the sticking point has always been this phrase, subject to the jurisdiction thereof. Now, there are constitutional scholars that are way better than myself, obviously, but the implication that a lot of people see in that phrase is that it requires something more than just physically being born on the soil. Subject to the jurisdiction is an extra step, according to some. And I think it makes sense. If you go to the next one, in recent decades, conservatives, immigration restriction advocates, and President Trump have advanced a narrower reading They argue that, quote, subject to the jurisdiction thereof requires a deeper form of political allegiance or domicile, essentially limiting automatic citizenship to children of U.S. citizens or lawful permanent residents. In short, the law was chiefly meant for freed slaves and their children, and that extending it to children of undocumented immigrants creates, quote, anchor babies, encourages illegal immigration and birth tourism, and imposes costs on the country. That makes, I think, sense.
You know, this. I think most people can understand the diplomatic exception because, you know, they're here on diplomatic. Yeah. We know exactly who they're under the jurisdiction of the country that they come in. And so they're a legitimate visitor, and none of them send up and say, well, they're on the soil, and they're trying to declare. People would laugh at that. They don't pay any attention.
Yeah.
But I think what also happens here in a system where democracy, which is a word I don't like, the democratic process, you got to have everybody voting and everybody doing it, everybody participating, and the system is designed that if you can get. And you're not talking about 100 people coming in illegally and getting to vote. We're talking now about millions, tens of thousands, if not millions, of people who do come, and so therefore the driving force of democracy. Everybody has everything, and yet the founders didn't deal with that word because they didn't even believe in it. The only time they taught about democracy is watch out, it's dangerous. Yeah. So it's this obsession that the democracy issue here at home is one thing, but when it is an advance for immigration and everything else, the more the merrier. And then all of a sudden it becomes a political issue. And some people, you know, it's amazing, you know, how they can signal that out and allow some people to vote and other people not, and you know, like voter ID. Yeah. Just think of the voter ID, the nonsense that goes on there, and yet the ID. Some of these people in democracy, well, you have IDs when you feel like it. And if you have an ID and it's a government thing, so we're going to do it. But what if it's an idea where we want to control who gets a vote? We want a lot of people voting. And people say, well, now you're being facetious. Now, that this will actually be motivated by getting, you know, a few people in come here illegally and they get the vote. And it seems to have created many little or policies, problems that are not easily digested. And I think the founders made a good effort about the jurisdiction thing, but it hasn't solved the problem.
It hasn't solved it. And I do think that Trump was onto something. This is now the first day, if you go to that next clip, the first day he came in office of his second term, January 20th of 2025, he signed that executive order protecting the meaning and value of American citizenship. The order directs federal agencies not to recognize U.S. citizenship for children born in the United States after February 20th, 2025, in two main scenarios. So in these two scenarios, the children would not get automatic citizenship. First one, the mother was unlawfully present in the U.S., and the father is neither a U.S. citizen nor a lawful permanent resident, i.e. green card holder, etc. Second scenario, the mother's presence was lawful but temporary. For example, student, work, or tourist visa, and the father is neither a citizen nor a lawful permanent resident. The administration maintains this is consistent with the 14 Amendment's original meaning and with the statutory codification in 8 U.S. Code 1401A, which largely tracks the constitutional language. I think that's a pretty reasonable thing that he did.
This is one thing that you pointed out that Trump may be onto something. He was onto something, and it'd be pretty hard, you know, for the majority of the American people not to agree with those two suggestions, you know, but the system works by pressuring people into doing what they want on their terms, and that to me is the weakness in the Congress. Congress, which was intended to be the most important branch of government, it wasn't one phrase here with the Supreme Court, and nor was it. The system of government that is demanding, majoritarianism and the dictatorship of the majority, and we've ended up with this mess. And I think it's systemic. I think it involves everything. It certainly involves immigration.
Yeah, it does. Pardon me. Well, Thomas Massey, as could be expected, is I think on the right side for the most part. Here's what he put out. This was back in January. I signed a brief to the Supreme Court in support of Trump's EO on birthright citizenship. Giving children of illegal aliens automatic American citizenship incentivizes unlawful immigration. To protect our national sovereignty, this practice must end. And this raises another issue, Dr. Paul, which a lot of the, as they call them, immigration restrictionists don't seem to get. Part of the problem is that you do have, and this is what we had to argue when we were on your staff, we have the problem of having a welfare magnet. If you can come here and manage to have a child, then you will be eligible for all sorts of goodies, food stamps and vouchers for your residency and all of these wonderful things that are paid for by the rest of us who actually have to work, but you can come over here and get them for free. So the problem really, when you scratch deep enough, is the welfare state, the warfare welfare state, providing incentives for people to come here illegally to get free stuff.
And this involves, outsiders coming in and new people coming in. But some people, we see that as a risk because it's forced welfare. It's stealing from one group to give to another. So you get rewarded. You come here illegally. You become a citizen. You get all these things. But the people who do this, they really approach the whole thing differently than how we see it on the independence that was provided with our Constitution. But they address this as a globalist issue. It's something that the whole globe, they want to bring people together. The whole idea of socialism is based on not just one city or one country, but they are determined, and yet it has failed so miserably, and yet we still argue this case. We have these socialists and communists manipulating our system to the point where they can get elected at the same time. The people who want to just take care of themselves and practice liberty and be responsible, they're losing ground.
Yeah.
Well,
there are approaches, and I think Justice Kavanaugh mentioned the legislative approach, which is important. Senator Rand Paul, now he's taking one angle that's probably the most sound, but the most difficult route to take. And I apologize, I didn't make a clip of it, I should have. But he put out a post back in April saying, "I'm introducing a constitutional amendment to end birthright citizenship. Under current interpretations of American law, anyone born on American soil automatically becomes a U.S. citizen, regardless of whether the parent was here legally or not. This is wrong and not the intent of those who wrote the 14th Amendment. We're a country filled with immigrants, and legal immigration is valuable and should be protected. But we are also a country whose borders have been too open and our generosity exploited too often. President Trump has moved to seal our border from illegal immigrants more than any other president, but we have more to do." Last paragraph of Senator Paul's introduction to this constitutional amendment. We need to make sure that only children born to legal residents of the U.S. are automatically citizens. I've supported protecting birthright citizenship from abuse since the beginning of my tenure in the Senate when I co-sponsored the Birthright Citizen Act of 2011. I remember that one. And now I am proposing an amendment to protect U.S. citizenship in case the Supreme Court fails to address the issue correctly, which now today we find out that, at least according to Senator Paul, they did fail to do it correctly.
The cases that bothered me when I were in Congress were the ones where there was a lot of sympathy expressed for them. That it wasn't their fault, and the families are split, and there was a sort of, it got your emotions worked up, and you wanted to do something about it. But that is one thing that is difficult. And I kept thinking there ought to be a statute of limitation. There was one example where 1 out of 10 wasn't born here, so the one kid was thrown out of the family. Why couldn't they have an exception on that? Why couldn't that be worked into the system that there would be an exception? And the other thing is, if you don't cut down on the invitation that people come here, we don't hear complications on green cards. Sometimes we're looking for people to take a green card and work here and be a productive citizen. And I don't know how that works exactly, but people with a green card and they live here and do a good job, I think they can eventually become citizen. So that to me is one thing. But what if it's a baby? My suggestion is, why don't they spend enough time here before they become the wonderful citizen of the United States that they spend exactly the same number of years you and I do.
Yeah.
I mean, we can't vote until we're 18.
Yeah,
so we spend 18 years. But people think, well, that's just silly talk. But it makes a point.
It does.
And the green card thing shouldn't be bashed, because I think most people understand this, and there are times, and I think right now there are times there's always jobs in this country if people are willing to do it. It's the manipulation by the Congress or regulations and labor and inflation and all these things. We put monkey wrenches into things that would work so smoothly if we just leave people alone.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the last thing we want to do today is a little bit of an update on something we've been following, and that's the section, previously known Section 224 of the National Defense Authorization Act. If you go to that next clip, now that is the section of the NDAA that essentially integrates U.S. military with the Israeli military. The weirdest thing that we've ever heard, but probably a function of, as we mentioned the first time, Dr. Paul, a declining and evaporating U.S. support for Israel, particularly after the slaughter in Gaza and now in Lebanon. So here's what happened yesterday. Congress blocks the Massey-Kana effort to kill U.S.-Israel integration. Congress has refused to even allow a full House vote on a provision that would pave the way for an unprecedented integration of the U.S. and Israeli military-industrial complexes. They refused to even allow the vote. The move came, if you go to the next one, through the House rules process for the NDAA. Unfortunately, after no debate on Monday, the Rules Committee chose to reject a bipartisan amendment to that would have stripped United States Israel Defense Technology Cooperation Initiative. Go to the next one. The provision they wanted to squelch, previously known as Section 224, creates an executive agent within the Department of Defense whose sole responsibility is furthering U.S. and Israeli military tech integration across nearly every facet of the defense process, from co-producing weapons to data fusion. That sounds terrible, and most people say it sounds terrible, whether it was Israel, New Zealand, Guatemala, or Marshall Islands.
But there's so much that's going on already. I mean, these wars in the Middle East,
Yeah.
we pay for them, we participate, we send them weapons, people make profits on that. That's where the problem is, the interventionism and the militarism that happens and the corporatism. So, but if you put them together, you sort of come out and you're admitting we do this all the time.
Yeah.
We just want to look more credible, and so they come up with this idea that we'll mesh them together. We'll be better fighters. We'll be better people, managing our empire. So you bring a couple of these countries in, and I want to be a member. But when you do that, under the conditions today of bringing people together in these in these alliances that we have and the wars that we fight, well, we know who's the boss. United States is is the boss, and that is one case. But there could be, there is, but it's not perfect either. There is indecisiveness, and the decisions are being made, in the Middle East wars. Who said what, when, and are they being loyal? but this would bring them together. But the big question is, who's going to be the boss?
Yeah.
I mean, if we have if the boss is going to be the one that is in the White House right now, or the one that just left, which one's going to be the decider? Yeah, the whole thing is just crazy, that they would mesh them together. I mean, it's not quite like the country coming together and making alliances when we had World War II to fight, and under those circumstances. That's a little bit different, but that's not what they're talking about.
No, not at all.
They're talking about something that it's not even temporary. This sounds like a permanent thing.
Yes, it is, absolutely. Well, I think Joe Kent got it right. He said the dangers of allowing any other nation to access our sensitive military technologies are obvious, including the fact that backdoors and spyware can be installed that will most certainly be used by the Israelis to influence U.S. policy. We already know that they do that all the time. In fact, the DIA, we talked about it on the show a couple of weeks ago, issued a warning that they are ramping up their spying, putting it on steroids. So we know that's what they do. Why would you open the door right at the time where they're ramping up, trying to break down the door? It's very concerning. Now, if you go to that next clip, by rejecting the Kana and Massey Amendment, the Rules Committee on Monday ensured, this is important, and I highlighted, ensured the American public would not even get to see how their representatives would vote on this pivotal issue. This is despite unprecedented levels of public distrust in the Israeli government and widespread public outrage directed at these proposals. I wouldn't say despite the unprecedented distrust. I would say it's because of the unprecedented levels of distrust that they don't want you to see. And you remember this very well, Dr. Paul. There were a lot of votes that they did not want to hold a recorded vote on.
That's right.
Yeah.
Over the years, we had to put up with and decide, vote against so much of this weaponry, share the weapons. Oh, we have a friend there in battle. We have to help them, so we're going to send them some weapon. And I would, try to stir up a little interest. I said, if we keep doing this, I can imagine that someday those weapons are going to be used against us, and that has happened.
Yes.
It doesn't take too long. They are. We either walk away and leave them, but they get turned against us. But that could be the same thing here. If we're giving them access, and then there's a breakdown on the relationship because it might only be in one circumstance. Maybe they say, oh well, we're going to invite some more members in there. I mean, the thing becomes wild. And they'll say, the secrets and this military stuff can be and would be used against it. It's already been that way.
Yeah,
I mean,
sure.
when you think of the incidents that have occurred where we have, that was an accident. We didn't manage to blow up that ship.
Yeah.
We didn't know it was American. That kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm going to close out now. It looks like we reached the end of our time allotted to us by the powers that be. But I do want to do one final thing. If you put that very last clip on, because I have not mentioned one of my favorite beverages. I share that with you. Our appreciation for this is called coffee. And we have a relationship with Moondoes Artisanal Coffee for the Ron Paul Liberty Report Revolution Blend. You can aim your phones at this QR code and order gourmet USDA organic special blend for Liberty Report viewers. Get you through this half an hour show and keep you going all day. So go ahead and click on that. Honestly, it's great coffee, and we appreciate the relationship with Moondoes Artisan Coffee, and we certainly appreciate everyone watching the show. And over to you, Dr. Paul.
Do we have time for a cup of coffee?
We need a cup of coffee. We need a coffee maker right here.
Okay, I want to thank our viewers for tuning in today to the report, and once again urge people to take the message and spread it, because that's the best way to spread a message of liberty. Yes, we have television, we have ads, we have books and everything, but still, I was told one time early when I was doing some campaigning that the most effective way of getting a vote is to personally talk to somebody and ask them for the vote. So people with smaller campaigns, they might be able to go to the houses in the district or whatever, whatever the race they're running in, and meet an individual and ask them. It is something that really is helpful, and that's the way this message is. If people, sincerely believe they have a good understanding of this and would like to spread the message, there's always a way. And when people ask me, well, what should I do? I don't know what to do. Just do whatever you like to do, whatever you enjoy. Some people are artists, some people are writers, and some people like to promote their causes in different ways. So we all have a responsibility, especially if there's a firm conviction that the issue of libertarianism and striving for peace and prosperity with nonviolence, that's not complicated, and it really works, and it's very necessary. As far as I'm concerned, if we go in the opposite direction, which we frequently do, it's up and down, that's a negative. Always go in the direction of trying to change things, but accepting the notion that people can do anything they want as long as it's peaceful to promote this cause. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.
Thanks for watching the Ron Paul Liberty Report. Like and subscribe to help spread the message. And until next time, live free.
This country